Welcome to One Way Podcast. I'm your host, Angel Ariola, and today we have Heather Anderson, wife of Pastor Andy Anderson. And so today she's going to share her testimony. She's going to share, things God's been doing in her life. And so, first off, just, let people know how long you've been saved and how did you come to church.
Okay. Well, I've been saved for 38 years and married for 40. So we got saved after we were already married, and we had dated 3 years before marriage. So we were together for 5 years. I got saved, my husband got saved, and we joined the church when it was back on Zarzamora Street when there were only 60 people in it, and now there are over 600. So the church has grown, and I hope that I've grown in my walk with Jesus as well.
And so, how did you someone witness to y'all? How did you hear about the church?
Well, it kind of goes back further than that. My husband and I met in university, and he was raised in a Christian home, and I was not. And we met in college. We started dating. We had a tumultuous relationship in college, breaking up, getting back together again. He introduced me to smoking pot and doing coke and some drugs and alcohol. We finished college and decided to get married. We lived in Chicago for a while, and one day I came home and the money was out of the bank account, the bills hadn't been paid, and he was doing drugs, and I realized we had a drug problem. We decided to move to Texas to start over with a job change, and I moved to Texas, and by the time I got here, he'd already made a new connection. And so I was sitting on the front porch of an apartment, no friends, no family, no job. My husband's at work. He's still got the drug problem. And I was drinking a rum and coke, hoping somebody would pass by. And right then I realized, oh my gosh, I have a drink in my hand. I'm alone. And my mom had problems with alcohol. And so I threw the drink down the sink and I said, God, please help me. And the next day I got a job. And the only other girl in the company was Barbara Hamper. And she started to witness to me. And she talked to me about Jesus. She invited me out for lunch, and she had her head bowed, and I thought she was choking. I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she said, oh, I'm praying over my food. And I said, oh yeah, me too. I'm a Christian too. And I invited her out for some beers at my husband's job. He was a bar manager at a restaurant. And she said she didn't drink. And I said, what do you mean you don't drink? Do you have stomach issues, stomach problems? And she said, no, I'm a Christian. I said, well, every Christian I've ever known drinks alcohol.
Right.
And she said, well, not this one. And she was a faithful testimony. And she invited me to a movie. It was one of the big three where Patty and the big Red Rock Dam and Jesus comes back and the rapture. And I realized that if Jesus came back, I would be left behind. And I raised my hand thinking I'd never be on that side of town because I lived way on the other side. And I'd never see these people again. And little did I know that they would become part of my family, that we'd become a church family. And I just started going to church, and I couldn't tell my husband anything because I'd never read the Bible. I didn't know anything. He knew more than I did. But a month later, he came to church with me, and he got saved, and we've just been faithful ever since. He threw all the drugs out the window on the way home from church, all the alcohol down the sink. I said, wait, not the alcohol. And he said, no, if we're going to do it, we do it all. No drugs, no alcohol, we're going to be saved. And he threw the alcohol out, and we've never touched drugs or alcohol since, and been completely delivered.
Wow. And so how old were you at that time?
26. We got married at 24. At 26, I got saved. He was 27.
Wow. And so you said you met in college, and where are you from originally?
I was born in New Jersey. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but he lived in Iowa, and we both ended up going to university at Iowa.
Wow.
That's kind of how we met.
And so you said you came to Texas for
his job transfer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, you're there in front of an apartment, you said?
Yeah.
Drinking, what was it again?
Rum and coke.
Rum and coke.
I hate to remember it, but I did.
So, and then really you just kind of like, where's my life going? Moment.
Absolutely.
And then you get a job. Okay, so when you come to the church, what's your first thought? Because you didn't grow up in church, right?
Not at all. When I showed up at church, I was wearing ripped out jeans, like bare feet, flip-flops kind of outfit, no bra. That was very important to me, that they would accept me the way I was. And I walked in, and the place was packed. It was before home videos, so it was before VCRs and all that. They were reel-to-reel movies. And so when they had a free movie, the entire neighborhood would come out. So it was full. It was full of black and Hispanics and white people, and it was packed, jam-packed full of people. And when I walked up to the door, a girl said, "Are you Heather?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Barbara said to save you a seat." And so they saved me a seat. And at the end of the movie, I believe it was Barry Parker who was preaching. He said, "Jesus is coming back. Are you ready? If you're not, raise your hand." And I did. And Bridget Harris met me at the altar, and she prayed with me to get saved. They were faithful to follow up on me. But I just started coming. Barb was at work, and Bridget was calling me, and they came to my apartment and visited and encouraged me and became part of my family. Well, I became part of theirs, I should say.
Right. And so there was no religion background in your life. Your parents never.
Not really. My mom was raised in a Catholic convent school. And so sometimes on a Christmas night, she might drink a little bit and take us to Mass and cry about Jesus, but I didn't get it. My grandmother would take us to Catholic church, and back in those days, they would preach in Latin and pinch
Really?
you if you moved. So I didn't know what they were saying. But I have to say, my grandmother sincerely looked for God. So she put that in us to say prayers at night. And later on, when she moved to Hawaii, my grandmother moved to Hawaii, and she took us to a church on top of a hamburger stand. And the pastor, preacher, whatever, he had a surfboard as an altar, and the ocean was behind him. And it was in the 60s, and so they were singing, about peace and all kinds of stuff on the guitar. So it was so natural and normal that idea of looking for God was put in me as a kid, but I didn't have any kind of understanding. I
Right.
never read the Bible,
Right.
never went to church.
Oh. So okay, now you get saved, and what did you think about the church as far as like, you come into a church, don't have a really church background, you hear tongues, all of that. What did you think about all that?
Well, first, the only person I heard speaking in tongues was Isaac Cortez. And I thought he was Iranian and he was speaking his own language. I didn't know what tongues was. Back in those early days, we wore shorts and T-shirts to church. So it was very casual. My husband came and they asked him to start playing the piano. And so he started wearing a suit, and I did get spoken to. I should wear a dress. I was very upset because I thought, man, I don't want to wear a dress. I have to wear a dress all week long, and Jesus accepted me in my T-shirt and jeans. Why do I have to wear a dress? But over time, I realized, just as that exampleship, to wear a dress, put on a bra, wear a dress, those were big things back then. The church, because I wasn't raised in it, I wasn't sure where the cross was and all that. So I did ask questions about it. We don't have a cross. Oh, that's because we don't have idols. It says it right here. And I was like, oh, okay. So every time I had a question, people were really faithful to show me in the Bible what it said. And I think that was what was different for me. It was that it wasn't just my opinion. It was, oh, well, this is what the Bible says. Here, let's read it together. So everybody was into the Word. Everybody had their own Bible. Bridget brought me my first Bible. It had a concordance on the back to help me. And Jean LaValle prayed with my husband. So he encouraged me to start memorizing Bible verses and putting the Roman road in my Bible so I could start witnessing to people and using Bible verses to share Jesus with them. So that's the whole Bible issue. I didn't wrestle with that. My husband came in and he's like, hey, where's all the stuff? And the guy didn't go to Bible college. So he knew more than I did, but I didn't know anything. Right. And I remember he asked me about tithing. Heather, are you tithing? And I said, I'm putting. I said, what's that? Because you're putting money in the plate. I said, yeah, I put money in. And he said, how much money are you putting in? I said, well, I figure church is as good as a movie, and a movie costs $3. So I'm putting in $3 every service. And he explained to me what tithing was. He was horrified. We had to go back and calculate my missing tithes.
Was this your husband?
My husband, because he knew better, right? So we calculated it and made it up, and then I saw the miracle that happens when you're faithful to tithe.
Right.
He meets the needs.
Wow, that's funny. I never heard something like that. That's cool. And so when you got saved, you were I guess can you say like you were just you took it all into you. It wasn't a problem as far as like, all right, they're gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. As far as like witnessing and all that, how did that all come about?
Actually, I feel like God gave me a special moment. Our pastor was not Pastor Ruby at the time. We had a previous pastor. It was Pastor Richard Montez. And he preached a sermon about the day you stand before God and you're all excited because you're going to go to heaven, and you're walking past all these people that you've seen every day and they're going to hell. And they say to you, why didn't you tell me? And that made me really stop and say, what would I say? I didn't tell you because I was afraid you wouldn't like me. I was afraid you wouldn't have lunch with me or that I'd offend you. Or would I tell them what I tried? So they started going on outreach, and I just started going with them. And I started keeping a record in the back of my Bible. I still have it. The first people that I prayed with, that I started following up with, it was immediate, starting to outreach. My husband got saved and he went street preaching. And so that was just the highlight of our Saturday, was outreach and street preaching on Saturday nights and after concerts and going down the Military Drive and just, so it just seemed to me normal. Everybody's going to hell. What am I going to do about it? And I even called my parents, hey, I found a church, I got saved. You know what? I realized all of us are going to hell. I didn't do the most wise way of sharing it with my family, but I was excited and I wanted to share it with them.
Right. No balance.
Yeah, no balance. But even now, I think going to Africa changed me, because in Africa at one time, the HIV virus was horrible. They didn't have antiretrovirals. So sometimes on a Saturday, they'd have 350 funerals in our community every Saturday. So you might talk to somebody and within a week or two, they're dead. So it kind of kept me on the edge. It was just preaching Jesus. You need to be saved and not worrying about friendship, evangelism, and dancing around issues. And maybe I haven't really changed back to the American way yet, but I still feel like I need to be on the edge about that.
Wow. That's neat. That's cool. Okay, so y'all get saved. And so your husband got saved a month after you?
Yeah.
Okay, and what was he thinking? Like, how did he feel about the church?
Well, he says his own testimony. He says behind the scenes what God was doing. For me, I just knew I didn't have anything to tell him, because I was reading the Bible for the first time, was hearing the Word of God for the first time, and I was just witnessing to him. But I had some really cool experiences that first month. I can remember he was at work, and I knew he was going to go party after work. So I stayed up all night, sitting on my bed and telling Jesus, please don't let him get high. Just don't let him get high. Just whatever he's smoking or drinking, don't let it. And he came home and he was mad. He's slamming the doors. And I said, what's wrong? He wakes me up and he goes, I spent all my money and I couldn't even get high. They must have had bad stuff. And God my heart rejoiced. Wow, God is so real. Look what he did. I can remember when within that first couple months, Andy had told me to start tithing when he did get saved. And he said, if you tithe when you have a financial problem, you can stop and say, God, remember, I'm a tither. I need this. So we had put some furniture on lay-by, and they called me, hey, we need $500 today at 5 o'clock, or you're going to not get your furniture. And so I sat down. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon at work on a Friday. And I sat down and I said, well, Jesus, Andy says that you promised to make sure to meet our need. And he showed me the verses. And so I need $500 by 5 o'clock. It's 4 o'clock, Lord. I don't know how you're going to do it. And about 4:45, my boss called me into his office.
Wow.
And he said, you've been working so hard. I just felt I needed to give you this. And it was a card with thank you. And it was a check for $500. I drove down to the place, signed the back, we tithed off of it, but we got our furniture. And I realized that was kind of a check mark. Yes, amen. I am your provider. Boom. I will meet your need. I will hear your prayers. It just really fired up my prayer life, praying for him and watching God do things. And when we did get saved, God doing financial changes in our lives. We got out of debt. We were $10,000 in debt. And we heard sermons about getting right with your money, tithing, and we just really cut the budget. We got out of debt, we're in debt again. So God did a real miracle in our lives. It took 7 years before we got sent out. All of our friends were getting sent out before us. And it was like, what's wrong with us? But I'm glad for that extra time in the mother church.
Right.
Pastor Ruby just knew the right timing.
Right.
And when we got sent out, I think we were ready.
Right. Oh, so that's like really like a big reference point in your salvation with that miracle with the $500. Man, that's really
And
cool.
I can say there's been a few of them.
Right.
But those are the first, you set those milestones up. You just remember them. So when you're struggling, you say, I remember. You do meet the need there.
Right. Okay, so when can you say, like, because you come to the church and you start hearing the preaching about, what our fellowship is about, reach the lost, planting churches. What did you think about all that?
Well, we got saved. My husband got saved. And about 3 months later, there was a Tucson Bible conference. That was a mind blower. So we went to El Paso, and then we did the concert scene there, and then we went to Tucson for the conference. And it was mind blower. Of course, I heard Pastor Warner, everybody's talking about how great he is. I understood zero. It was way over my head. I had no idea what the guy was talking about. But it was such an intense environment, and Andy was so fired up. And I can remember the Friday night they play this song, Rise Up, O Man of God, and they say, if you feel called to preach, stand to your feet. So I'm sitting with my head bowed. My husband stands up, and I look up at him and I say, Andy, sit down. You're asking people to preach. He goes, yeah, I know. I feel like I'm called to preach. And I'm like, I'm not called to be a pastor's wife. I really wrestled with that. He said, this is what I feel God wants me to do. And there were months where he wrestled with it. He couldn't sleep at night. He's walking the street talking to God. I'm not qualified. I can't do that. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, I can't be a pastor's wife. That's just not for me. I'm just never been what I would perceive was a pastor's wife. So he finally settled it in his heart. I want to be a pastor. And he talked to me and I said, look, I'm a jeans, t-shirt kind of person. I don't have time to do my nails. I'm not, what I thought a pastor's wife was. And he was really kind. He just said, Heather, I fell in love with you in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. So if God sends us somewhere, wherever we go, it won't matter what you wear. It's not going to matter whether your hair's always perfect and you have your stuff done. And I said, okay, if that's the deal, I'll follow you.
Wow.
And so we got sent to San Marcos. That's our first church that we pioneered, was in San Marcos.
And when was this? What?
Let's see. My daughter was 6 months old. 8. She was born on 3/30/93. So 1993. We went to San Marcos, and we struggled to get him finding a job. We lived in a barn, the top half of an old barn. Anyway, it was a struggle. But we got a perfect location, and we opened, and within 5 months, I think, we were self-supporting. And within 3 to 4 years, he was full-time pastoring, and the church cranked. It was amazing. It was amazing. Our church really did well.
All right. And so when y'all got sent out, you really didn't have no family here, right, in San Antonio, did you?
No, my family cut. My dad was I loved my dad. He was my hero. When I got saved, he kind of cut us off for 20 years. And my family all thought we were wackos, crazies. Nobody came to visit, ever.
So you got saved, and I remember you said you started witnessing to him. Tell us a little bit about that. What did they think, and what was?
Well, my parents were living in Florida. One sister lived in Europe. One sister was living in Pennsylvania. The other was in Chicago. I have a twin sister. So when I got saved, I called everybody and told them how excited I was. I got saved. They thought I was a little bit crazy about this Jesus stuff. And they thought it was mostly because my husband had some issues with drugs and alcohol. They thought, well, that's why. It's a crutch. It's a crutch. So for 20 years, until we got sent to South Africa, so let's see, about 11 years saved or so. Before we went to Africa, my whole family came to meet. And I had to talk to them one more time. They said, you're crazy. You're going to raise your kids in Africa, their education. You're not going to have any money. It's like being on the dole. The church is paying you. They didn't understand it. They thought we were crazy. And so that's pretty much how it went all the way up to COVID. And in COVID, my sisters watched my husband preach. They both went to Catholic church, but they heard my husband preach and they realized we're not crazy. And both of them really opened up for salvation. My dad visited me in Africa and he got saved. And my mom passed away. I got a chance to witness to her and sent someone to pray with her because both of them passed away when we were in Africa. And so at first it was just those phone calls. It was like people just didn't want to talk to me. And my dad would visit once a year for 2 days and take off. He didn't want to keep that close relationship until he got saved. And then it was an eye-opener. He was like, wow, this is great. I get it.
Right. Wow. Okay, so San Marcos, and then you were there for 4 years?
6.
6 years. And then what happens after that?
Going to Africa kind of has my side of the story. My husband has a different one. But when I was a kid, my dad used to read me stories from the encyclopedia. And a lot of them were about Africa. So he sparked in me just a love of Africa. I even did some speech contests about the Congo and read poem competitions about the Congo. So Africa was kind of an interest in my heart. I can remember watching Swiss Family Robinson and they're riding an ostrich. I said, one day I'm going to ride an ostrich in Africa. My dad goes, yeah, I believe it. You're going to do that, Heather. Anyway, so years later, we're at a conference and they send Alvin Smith to Africa, to the Eastern Africa, Sierra Leone. And Andy and I really gave to that offering. And I walked up to him. I was a little bit nervous. But I said, oh, you're going to Africa. I've loved Africa. And he goes, did you give tonight? And I said, yeah, I did. He goes, if you gave and you pray for Africa, God will give you a heart and a burden for Africa. And I said, I promised to pray for you. And I was faithful. And about 5 years later, he sent a video back from Sierra Leone. And my heart was just seeing what God was doing there, the African people, the need. I remember going to the altar and just saying, God, I will go to Africa. If you ever ask us, I will go. And I actually spoke in tongues for the first time. And it was interpreted that someone in the building was going to be a missionary one day. And so I was like, okay, wow, that was pretty cool. Years later, I think 6 years later, 5 years later, Alvin Smith went to Killeen to preach. And he said, let's go hear him. So we drove up there, we're in the service, and he's preaching, and I think either after or before, he said, you. And I'm looking around, because I don't get called out of services. And he said, you, and he was pointing me. He goes, you've been praying for something for 10 years. This year it's going to happen. You haven't talked to anybody about it, but this year it's going to happen. So he prayed for me. We get in the car, and Andy goes, what have you been praying for? I said, I've been praying that we get to go to Africa. And he laughed. He said, oh, Heather, we're nobodies. We're not going to go to Africa. But about 3 months later, Pastor Ruby was supposed to preach in Cape Town. And he said, Andy, could you cover for me? I can't go. And why don't you bring Heather? So we went to South Africa. And we saw an amazing country and the mix of races, white and colored and black. And the pastor at the time brought us to a township. And we're standing on a hill and we saw a million people, shacks. And just seeing that poverty and the shacks and the people, we both cried. And we got back on the plane and my husband said, there you go. We went to Africa. And I said, well, I wasn't talking visiting, but I just feel like I have a heart for Africa. So I just shut up and started praying for him. And one night he was reading Pastor Mitchell's book. And it says, so you won't go to Africa. And he's like, oh my gosh. So Pastor Ruby finally went 2 years later to Africa, South Africa, came back. And my husband said, hey, called him up. Hey, Pastor, you're back from South Africa. What'd you think? Oh, it's open. He said, well, have you ever thought about sending a couple there? And Pastor Ruby said, I don't know. Why? And he said, well, he goes, why? Who? And he goes, how about Heather and I? And he said, when he was there, God spoke to him. You're going to plant somebody here, but you won't have to ask. They're going to ask you.
Wow.
And he says, you're going 6 months.
Wow.
And that was it. We went. The best thing I ever did. I so encourage young people, just young, early 30s, 20s, early 30s, even if you have kids, to go on the mission field. There is nothing like it. It was the best thing I ever did. I don't know who I would be if we had not gone there. I don't know who my kids would be. Our whole reference is before Africa and after Africa, before. Right. and after. It's like life began when we went to Africa. I loved San Marcos and I love the people. I still do. But Africa was like, this is it.
So San Marcos was your first pioneered that, and then from there y'all went to South Africa. Wow. And then y'all stayed in South Africa for
9 years the first time. And then we turned the church over to a missionary and we came home. We thought, my husband wasn't sure we were done, but he knew the timing was to go. And so we were home for 3 years, just got settled, built a house. I got a job as a teacher. He was evangelizing. And then he called me one day from out preaching for somebody. He goes, Heather, I've really been praying. What do you think about going back? I said, okay.
wow.
He said, what about the house? We only lived in it 2 years, brand new house. I said, we can rent it. And so we went back. And we were back the second time 11 years. So we spent 20 years in Africa.
Wow.
Actually, I think I left part of my heart there. I know I've left part of my heart in Africa.
Wow. So can you just describe a little bit your first time going to Africa when you settled in? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because in my mind, and I'm sure everybody's mind, is like, you think Africa, you just describe. We think automatically what they show on TV, just all the huts and they're just poor and all that. But can you describe a little bit?
Well, South Africa is a little bit different. If you go to South Africa, you can live in a first world environment, kind of like California. And then 20-minute drive, you're living in the hood. So in terms, it's not like Central Africa, Kenya, with all the animals and the savannah and the people, it's not that kind of Africa. It's a very developed, it was settled by the Dutch, and then the English took it over. So there's a lot of Dutch heritage there. There's a lot of English heritage. The buildings are all made out of cement blocks. And so all your plumbing's on the outside, and you see the wires running around the inside of your house. There's no air conditioning. There's no central heat. So you just get used to the weather. But we lived in we landed, and a couple that was pastoring there, they let us stay with them. My husband got a car. We had to look for a house. We wanted to go into a black township, but at the time, freedom had only come to South Africa in 1994, and we were there in the year 2000. So the blacks had only gotten the right to vote and their freedom from the whites because of apartheid for 6 years. So there was a lot of tension between the black and the whites. So we wanted to go to a black township, and we were told, no, you can't. You've got 2 little girls. They will kill you, and there's violence. And so we decided, okay, we're going to go to a colored area, which is a mixed race. They actually look Hispanic, brownish skin, And we went there and we found a building and we opened, and boom, we had 45 people, and they were paying the building rent, and they were helping with nursery, and they're buying cookies for the nursery. And they seemed very friendly and responsive, but they weren't getting saved. My husband said, something's not right. I just feel like we're missing something. And so one day a black South African man came into church, and we followed up on him. And he said, could you give me a ride home? And he said, sure. So we drove into a township. And a township is land that was cleared away. The blacks were made to live there. They had to build, some of them got homes built for them, but many of them they had to live in shacks. And so he lived way up in the shacks. And we're walking around there, and black people came out, and some of the kids had never seen a white person. So they're touching my skin. I mean, we're talking 25-minute drive, and they never really saw a white person up close. Wow. So we didn't understand the language. My kids are holding on to me, and we're walking through this area, and the man essentially said to my husband, I'm sure he's got his own testimony, but he said, what are you doing there? We need you here. So he wrestled with that and felt like, you know what? So he drove through the township. Guguletu is the name of it. It's called Our Pride in isiXhosa, which is their language. And he said, God, if you give me a building, I'll come here. And he went to a privately owned hall, talked to the lady. She goes, you can have this place every Sunday night, Wednesday. And so we talked to the church, coloreds. We said, why don't you come with us? So they came, but they were very scared because they're the wrong color and the wrong side of town. So eventually those people found other churches to go to. We tried to hook them up to other churches that were there. There weren't there many of us. And we opened our church in the Black Township and had an amazing experience there.
Wow. And so I was in, I just Google it too.
Google it too.
And y'all stayed there the whole 9 years?
Yeah, the whole 9 years. We started in the building, then we put up a tent. But the people that we hired, the guys from the church, one of them got stabbed. There was shooting. My husband was standing on the platform, and somebody shot through the tent and hit the pole above his head, and he still has the bullet today. So we faced some things. There was violence. He had a gun put to his head 4 times. He was carjacked once, right the night before Pastor Ruby was coming for the very first time. They stole our vehicle and they carjacked him. And we were robbed a total of 14 times in that 9-year period. But that actually worked for our benefit, if you can believe it. It worked because we told them Jesus will take care of you. Jesus loves you. He's for you. He's going to watch over you. And so when it happens to us, what are we going to do? Leave? So we just said, God, we're here. And my husband said, it was the day before Pastor Ruby was coming. He drove up to the property. The men didn't open the gate for him. So they got out, opened the gate, got back in. Then they put a AK-47 at the window. And everybody in the church watched it happen. So he went to press the emergency button because we had satellite tracking on the van. And he said, okay. So he got out, and he walked in. Everybody in the church was like, oh my gosh, the piano was gone. The vehicle's gone. Everything, his passport, everything was gone. And so Pastor Ruby started the next day. So we had the revival. Pastor Ruby was amazing. And then the revival ended, and a little delegation of men came up to him. Pastor, we thought Pastor Ruby would tell us that you're leaving because you were robbed. We got the van back, by the way, and we got everything. We got most of the stuff back. And he said, you know what? I'm not leaving this place. You're going to have to carry me out or carry me out in a box. So 9 years later, when we did leave, they said, you said you weren't going to leave us. So they picked him up on their shoulders, and they sang, and they carried him off the property on the last day we were there.
Wow.
It was
wow.
It was an amazing time.
Man. Whew. Okay, so 9 years. And then did someone take it over from the States or somebody from South Africa?
Somebody from the States.
Somebody
from Pastor Ruby's church took it over.
Okay, nice. Come back for 3 years, and then he's evangelizing, and you said you started working a teacher.
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I actually became a teacher in San Marcos because I wanted to reach teenagers, but they wouldn't let you on the property. And Pastor Ruby had preached a sermon about if you want to be a missionary. I mean, I was already praying about Africa. Be a teacher or be somebody in the medical field. So I went to school at night. It was daddy night. I went to school on Tuesday and Thursday nights at SWT, Southwest Texas State, and got my teaching certification. And so when we came back from Africa, I just started substituting and then started teaching so that we could get a home. We were 50 years old. We never owned a house. So we said, this is it. This is our time. And so then he was evangelizing. I was teaching. We finally settled down, and then it's time to go again.
Wow. And so where'd y'all go the second time?
The second time, we thought we were going to pioneer again in South Africa in a place called Mbombela, which is up northern South Africa, and it has snakes. So I told him, if we're going to go where there's snakes, you're going to have to buy me a pair of boots. So he bought me a pair of Texas boots, Western boots, and I was visiting my dad in Florida, and he called me up. He goes, well, I'm not sure you're going to get to wear your boots very much, but you might want to pick up a bathing suit. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, we're going to go to Port Elizabeth and take over that church there. They had 4 or 5 churches out in the townships, but the church itself is in the city. So in the main city, a lot of university students there, and we got to take over that church. And that was a privilege.
And how was that? Was that any different from when y'all were in Guguletu? The environment, how was all that?
Everything was different. Well, when we opened the church in Guguletu, it was kind of an eye-opener. I can remember we were cleaning the tent, so I brought some chicken to put on the grill, and we were going to eat. We're eating, and I finished my chicken bones, and we all are eating, and they're looking at my plate. And they said, are you going to eat those? I'm like, the bones? I said, no, do you want them? Yes, so they devoured it. And I realized at one point we had about 100 people, but nobody had a job. And you could smell them starving on their breath. They didn't ask, they never begged, but they were starving. So at the time, black empowerment was coming to South Africa, giving black people jobs, but they had to know English to get a job so they could work for a company. So we were teaching them English. So between my husband and I, we worked really hard to give them math classes, typing classes. We opened a typing school, English classes, whatever we could do to get them jobs. So within 9 years, everybody had a job, which was amazing. And the church was self-supporting. Within 5 years, South African church was self-supporting. Didn't support us, but it supported them, the church.
Right.
So it was a miracle. But they were hungry and in poverty. Like there's a lot of stories there about how that was. We went to Port Elizabeth. They're mostly young university students. So somebody had money of paying for them to go to school. They were working people. But what would happen is the university students would finish school, then they'd move back wherever because they couldn't find jobs. We are so blessed in America to have job opportunities. Some people in South Africa don't get their first job till they're 32. So they're living on government assistance through the age of 24, and then they're trying to wheel and deal. So they get their college degree, but then they couldn't find a job. So we decided what we needed to do was we needed to keep them in our church. So that means we better find them jobs. So they'd get a degree, but they couldn't use computers because only privileged white kids had computers in their school. The poor communities didn't have typing skills, computer opportunities. So we opened a computer and typing school and gave them a certificate when they passed the class. And then we helped them find jobs, resumes, just like we did in Guguletu, but these are higher level jobs because they have degrees. And so the number of students, the church started growing in size because they got to stay. And that was the best part. They got to stay. And they'd stay and they meet. We had 28 weddings in 11 years, and which was awesome. So we got families starting to grow. Because when we first got there, there were a lot of singles, just a few couples. But church started growing, and we had weddings and families. And then they started driving cars and buying homes. And we just got to see the blessing of God. If you are faithful to tithe and you do the right thing, between righteousness and opportunity, you have the lift of God in your life. That's what should happen. If God's not lifting you out of that, lifting you up in terms of prosperity, just general prosperity, not limousines. But if you're not getting that prosperity, there's something wrong. That is God's heart to lift us up. So Port Elizabeth was a miracle, and we just loved it. We love the people. I miss them.
And how was like the race? Is it mixed in Port Elizabeth?
No, not really. We were the only two white people in Guguletu for about a 10-mile radius. So the entire church was black or colored. And then Port Elizabeth was just a couple of precious young men that were white. Everybody else was black. And so it takes somebody really special and saved to say, I don't care. I'm here, because there's a lot of the racial divide there. But I do see that more and more we're seeing more coloreds and more white people added Port Elizabeth, but for a long time, no, it's all black.
And is it still like that to this day? Like the tension, the race, and all that?
I'm not sure it's tension. I just think it's uncomfortableness. I don't think I personally, it's my personal opinion, I don't think racism has to do with color. I think it's not understanding culture.
Right.
Like they do things you go, what's that? What are you doing? You don't understand it. So even when they were looking for jobs, you have a black person going to a white man for a job. So in black culture, you do not look at somebody you respect in the eye. So you walk in and you look down. And so the guy's talking to you, you're not looking him in the eye. For the white people, we think if you can't look me in the eye, you're not telling me the truth, you're a liar, right? You're ashamed of something. So right off the bat, they're trying to show respect. We think, white people think you're disrespectful. So just bridging the gap, getting people to understand, hey, when you go in, if it's a white person sitting there, make sure you wait to be asked to be seated for an interview. Look them in the eye. Tell them the truth. Be prepared with a resume. We had to teach them how to bridge the cultural divide. Once they got their confidence and were getting jobs, then you could see that they were fine. But for the first initial getting jobs, I think that they were really fearful about finding jobs. And white people coming in, they might get saved, but they just, unless they hang out and start being a part of the church, you don't realize, hey, we're all the same. It's just different. We're just going to be a little bit different.
What would you say some things that you had to adjust when you got over there, as far as like cultural wise? What are some things that there was?
I think the most poignant memory for me was when we first went to Guguletu, and my husband, we were in the car, we're parked on the street, and some African men asked my husband to come to one of their shacks and talk to them. So he got out of the car. I said, I'm tired. The kids were asleep in the back. So I'm in the car. The doors are locked. He goes. I don't know where he goes, but he goes off. And I kind of fall asleep. And then when I wake up, I realize, oh my gosh, now I don't have a cell phone. I don't know how to drive on the left-hand side of the road yet, and I don't have the keys. My kids are asleep, and I do not know where my husband is. And I'm telling you, I had this sense of anxiety and panic. I could feel, I started hyperventilating, and I hit the horn like, oh my gosh. And God, I sounds crazy, but God spoke to me and said, if you don't get over this fear right now, I cannot use you here. So I repented. I will not be afraid, Lord. You brought us here. I'm not going to be afraid. And I think because of that, I walked around there freely. I witnessed. I usually had somebody with me, and I had rules. When I got somewhere, I had to call my husband. I got a cell phone. And when I was leaving, he knows I was leaving. We had some like agreements. But I went through there. I drove through that township with the girls in my car like I would in a neighborhood here. And I was never personally robbed or accosted. There was one time there was some young men standing on the corner, and I was with some girls outreaching, and everybody got quiet. And they all kind of came against me, and they all put their heads down. They got quiet. Nobody was talking. And we're walking, and I could tell they were afraid. So I got my flowers. I walked right up to those guys. And I said, hey, you guys, you know what? God loves you. They said, we need a job. I said, I know. God's an equal opportunity employer. You get right with him, he'll help you. I witnessed to them. I passed out flyers. You need to come. Invited them to church. And I went back with the girls, and we're walking, and they're so quiet. And they go, Heather, those are scolies, thieves. I said, yeah, I know. I know we were really afraid. And I said, you know what? I told God I wasn't going to be afraid. I'm going to face it. Walk right up to him. I'm not going to be afraid. And I thank God for that he really helped me with that, because I was not afraid after that. So that, I think, was the biggest cultural, the fear of I'm out here and anything could happen to me. Right. So that was probably that was the funny kind of stuff, is like you go to the grocery store and they don't call the same things the same. They had Dr. Pepper at one time, but nobody bought it because they thought it was pepper. Things, just the funny stuff. Yeah. Oh, wow. That kind of, those kinds of things. I'm looking for baking powder, and they don't call it baking powder, or just everything has to be from scratch. There's no box of cake mix when I was there. You had to make everything from scratch. Wow. Cookie mixes, everything's from scratch. Flour, and mixing it up yourself. So that was cultural. Right. So you couldn't just go. They don't have like just stores around the corners, is it stuff like that? They have grocery stores like you would have an HEB, but nothing on the count. Like you can walk in and buy a mix here, eggs, oil, and water, and you can make something. Right. But over there, you have to make it from scratch. You'd have to buy the flour and the baking powder and the salt and all. You have to mix it all up from the beginning. So some of the products that we would have here, they don't have over there. You just have to adjust. Wow. At first, we brought food with us. But after the first 2 years, when we went back, we didn't bring food with us. Back then, they didn't have a weight limit, so you could shove as much as you could in your suitcases. Now you have a weight limit, but back then we didn't. And you could bring 2 suitcases, so we could bring food back if we wanted to. Like his Pop-Tarts, ranch dressing, the powder, macaroni and cheese. I'd bring the packets and forget the noodles because I could get those. Just the funny little things that you miss. But over time, you get adjusted to the food. Right. So that was kind of different. They touch each other a lot. And now that I'm back in America, I realize how we like our space here. But over there, they'll sit. If you have a row of chairs, everybody will fill the first row in. So I'll say, oh, is this your friend? Oh, no, I don't know her. They're sitting right next to each other. And they lean against each other. And you shove as many people as you can into a vehicle. Nobody's worried about their space. And so now I come back, we have huge chairs, and everybody keeps a chair in between each other. And I'm feeling like, I have no friends. Nobody wants to sit next to me. So the space issue is a little bit different. the way everything's, you have 15 people living in a shack, so they're used to sharing space, and we all have the luxury of space.
Right.
So those are some cultural differences.
Nice. Okay. I was gonna earlier when you mentioned y'all went because y'all took over a church, right? This is in Port Elizabeth.
Yes.
And how was that? How would adjusting to all that?
I've talked to other women. What's easier or better? I think we pioneered twice. In pioneering, if people come back, they like you, so there's a confidence that they like you. When you take over, we were the fourth pastor's wives. I was the fourth pastor's wife that they had. And I think women take time to adjust. The last one was with them, I think, 5 years. Before that was 2 or 3 years. Before that was 6 years. So we were celebrating, I think, our 20th anniversary of the church the second year we were there. So it was 18 years old, the church. So I was the fourth one. And I think it's difficult just trying not to, you want everybody to like you, you try to meet everyone. Their names are difficult. Names like Tembakazi or, let's see, Ngomso. The names have clicks in them, Ngaba, things like that. So, so I'm trying to learn all their names. There's about 140 people. So I'm trying to learn all these African names. One of my favorites, and she turned out to be a very dear friend, was Sebenzile Fepiwe. So they're just fun names, Dondashi, and just really special people in my Lindiwe and Zianda, and the names are so different. So learning their names was difficult, and it was important to them that I would learn their name. And they obviously gave me a name. And so just taking over was difficult. I think it takes anyone coming in about 3 to 4 years to feel like it's your church and they love you and they understand you and you can be yourself.
Right.
So it's not the easiest thing.
Right. Wow. Okay, so y'all were there 11 years. And as far as the church, when y'all left, did it grow like in numbers, and how was all that?
Well, when we left Guguletu, there were some major changes. They changed buildings and locations. They lost quite a few. There was a lot of change because they moved into an area that was kind of anti-Black, and so there were some changes there. Everyone who went did their best. We all do your best. Right. Everybody does their best. So what happened was, one of our disciples took over the church while we were in Port Elizabeth. So my husband recommended they go back to the first building where we had revival, where we had so many people. And the building had fallen apart. They hadn't paid their water, 81,000 American dollars in water bills. They didn't pay their water, and the building was falling apart. My husband met with a lawyer, and he said, what you should do is create a nonprofit company and partner with the board of directors of the building and try to save it. And so we took some of my inheritance. My dad passed away. So we took some of my dad's inheritance, we put it in the building, we fixed it up, and now there's a board there. And the pastor that's there is a disciple, so he's an African, and he runs that board. 5 people, I think, from the church and 4 from the community. So we have 1 extra vote. So he's running that whole hall. He got the water bill paid. He has grace with the community. He's doing a fantastic job. The numbers are back up. Not to 145, but in the 100 and something. So he's doing well. He's a full-time pastor. They're doing a great job. Amazing job.
Nice.
So that's the first church. So we indigenized that church. The Port Elizabeth church, when we left it to a fantastic couple, Kolani and Nosi. They were assistant pastors with us for 3 years. So he's ready. They know how we do things and why we do things. And from what we understand, an African reaching Africans, the church is growing in size and number. We went back once since we've been gone 1.5 years, so we haven't been gone very long. But from what I understand, the church is growing in numbers and more university students. He's young, he's energetic. His wife is very sweet, and they're just plugging away and continuing what we did there. Nice. So we got to indigenize both churches.
So now that's like when you nationalized it, right?
Nationalized.
Yeah, I remember meeting Kalani, right? That's his name?
Kalani, yeah. I think he preached for your church.
Yeah, twice. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so 11 years, and then you come back. And like, what was the reason for y'all coming back? They just once y'all nationalize it, were y'all ready to come back?
Well, I think, the hard part is you're there. Now the church is doing great. I mean, we had nurseries, and we had reading class, and a little lambs class, and we had a children's church, and it was cranking and doing so great. But then my husband says, okay, it's doing great. We have a guy that's ready. Do we just sit back here and enjoy it? Or do we say, now it's time to give it to an African? That's always the goal, is to turn it over so they can reach their own. And so San Antonio had been supporting us for 20 years. And he's like, we're finished. We've done as much as we can do. He's going to take it further. We're going to put it in his hands and just trust him to do the right thing. And so far, that's exactly what's happened. They've done a wonderful job. And he said, now it's time for us to go home. And for right now, he's evangelizing. And so it's a year. It's just been a year and a half. So we're still trying to figure it out.
Nice. And so earlier you mentioned you teach classes too still.
Yeah. When we came back, the 3 years in between, I was a full-time teacher, and then my husband was evangelizing. So he'd come home for the week, and I'm at school, and then at night I'm like, help me grade papers. So we didn't have very much time together. So now we're getting older. So we've come back, and he asked me not to take a full-time job on, so that I'd be available for other things. Like I cleaned the church, that kind of stuff. So I started teaching Chinese kids English when we were in Africa, just to help with some expenses. If he wanted to go somewhere and I wanted to go with him, I'd need to come up with the money. So I just kind of worked and saved, and so I could go with him. We went to the UK, we went to China from South Africa. And so when I came back to America, I said to my Chinese students, I can teach you from here. So it's online. I teach Chinese kids. Early mornings, I teach at a gym. I've been teaching aerobics classes for 42 years in America and in Africa. So for 42 years. So I keep that up. I teach elderly people. I find it's a great opportunity to witness to people. The gym, some people think the gym is a bad place. I think it just depends on the person. But for me, I've been teaching people, and people go to the gym for all kinds of reasons. It's a really great opportunity to witness to people. They're there. Some are lonely. Some of them, their husbands have left them. Some of them, they've been divorced, or they've died. They're at the gym to make a friend, community, and so I use it for an outreach. So I'm doing that.
Okay, so now you're back home, enjoying it. Can,
Yeah,
I'm sure you miss it. Yeah.
I'm thankful. Every morning I wake up, I'm thankful we have electricity, we have water every day, and I have Wi-Fi.
Right.
Those are things we really wrestled with. Sometimes 6 hours without electricity, and you would never know when. So you're going to cook dinner, all of a sudden there's no electricity. So living there got pretty rough for a time, and sometimes you wouldn't have water for 3 days. So as soon as you know there isn't going to be any water, you fill up your bathtub, you fill up your coolers, you fill up all these containers,
right.
like the woman with the oil in the jars, right? I'm filling up everything with water because you just didn't know when you're going to have water again. So from that, I'm very grateful. We have law enforcement here. We have ambulances that will come and pick you up if you're sick, hospitals, and water, electricity.
I think, like, when you experience stuff like that, you come over here and you're like, oh, this is kind of, in a way, like, this is really nothing. You can go through stuff, you can go without light for a couple hours, and you're like, no, this is nothing. And we panic over here. Light goes off, and we're like, well, what's going on? The phone's dead, and it's like, and I'm hearing you say this, like, wow, like 6 hours. You don't know when the light's gonna come back on, but so I guess it does teach you a lot of stuff too while you're over there. That's pretty cool. Well, before we finish, if you could leave, words of encouragement to anybody listening, young girls, and maybe they have dreams to, whatever it is, to be a pastor's wife, or maybe they're just going through things, whatever it is. What were some words you leave any listeners?
Actually, I hope that my testimony will show young girls that are saying, I can't, or couples that say, we can't do it. You can do it. But I think that when men go overseas, like when they get a chance to preach, do whatever you can to bring your wife. I think having my husband and I standing on the edge of a township, we both got this burden and we knew that's what God wanted us to do. And I think if you bring your wife to get outside of America and just see the need, that she will be, if that's God's place for them, you guys will be burdened with it. It'll happen. It'll happen. And you can do it. And you'll never be sorry. I have not met one missionary who has gone that said, I'm so sorry I went there. Not one. Most of them have stories to tell, to share that are amazing. And I'm grateful for my stories. I feel like it's kind of been my little gift from God. Africa was my gift. He gave that to me and the people there. So I think that we're running out of time. Jesus is coming back. There's so many people that will greet you with open arms, that are happy when you call them. You say you're following up on them. Oh, thank you for coming. It's amazing. It can be so different. And in 1 hour, you can pass out 500 flyers by yourself in 1 hour in some of these places. And you just never know what God will do. It's so exciting to see and build this church and save people and see their lives completely changed. So I just want to encourage, there's many countries out there we don't have any churches in. We have many churches that they're tired, the missionaries tired. We were there 9 years. We were kind of waiting for someone who's willing to come to take our place, but it was kind of dangerous. So not many people were like, hey, Pastor, we want to take over from the Andersons, in a township. So there are people that are tired. They're out there. They're waiting for someone just to say, I have a burden for that nation. We'll take your place. The missionary needs to go at some point. And so I'm hoping that I inspire you to go. Give it a try. Go on a mission trip. Go with your husband when he preaches. See what's there and just see what God puts in your heart. And you can raise your kids there. My kids are doing well. They finished college, university kids, and they did well. Kids are not a problem. God takes care of your kids. God will take care of your family.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to give your life to Jesus Christ, just pray this simple prayer with me real quick. Say, Father God, I'm a sinner in need of a Savior. I ask that you forgive me of all my sin. Come into my heart and be my Lord and Savior. I believe you died on the cross and rose the third day. Thank you for forgiving me of all my sin. If you prayed that prayer and you need a church to go to, come in, that number on the bottom of the screen. Come in contact with us, and we'll help you find a local church to go to and start living for God. Thank you.